My name is Laura Podesta, and I work full-time at Fiverr. Department. A big part of my job here is getting the interesting stories of Fiverr freelancers and Fiverr businesses in front of journalists so that they can write compelling stories. And we are also here in the communications department keeping the world updated on all of Fiverr's new updates and product launches. We actually had one today. But what's relevant to this topic and this conversation is that I also, in addition to being a full-time member of Fiverr, I'm a freelancer on Fiverr as a voiceover artist and also as a content writer. I help writing mini documentaries. And before I worked at Fiverr full-time, I was a CBS News correspondent. So I have a lot of experience in those areas. The other person that you see on the screen is our guest speaker, Paris Davis. Paris is one of our U.S. community leaders, and he both purchases and sells services on Fiverr. He's been a buyer on the platform since 2013, right, Paris? And in 2022, you joined me and became a Fiverr freelancer as well. So could you tell us a little bit more about this transition to both being a Fiverr freelancer as well as the kinds of services that you are purchasing on Fiverr, and a little bit more about the business that you run?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for bringing me on. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Laura. So just to give everyone a little bit of background, a quick snapshot just about myself and how I transitioned to where I'm at today. So I'm a former basketball athlete who graduated with a biological science degree and a master's in business. Due to not finding a job for almost 2 years, right? 2 years, that was a long time. I started my entrepreneurial journey right out of college by building my first legitimate six-figure basketball business. In parallel, I also started to excel as an award-winning project manager in the corporate world, where I enhanced my knowledge and experience about business development. Now, as my business and skills grew, I started to see a gap between how businesses are developed at a high level, right, in the corporate world, and saw that versus how it's developed at a lower level, which are the small businesses, which I started. So I created a management consulting company that not only managed the businesses that I supported, but other entrepreneurs and small business owners as well. And it focuses on accelerating the development and success of small businesses, entrepreneurs, and freelancers today with a goal-focused approach. Now, right now, my focus is mainly on mentorship, education, and consulting. And my team consists of freelancers across the world that are well established, they're experts, and they tell me what to do nowadays. So that's where I'm at as of today. Now, when I started as a buyer, I picked and choose what I needed for my business. But then after years of working with the community and finding the right talent and becoming a community leader, I said, hey, let me see what the seller side looks like so that I can become well diverse in understanding the platform, and then also help the small businesses and freelancers, which I mentor, excel their business a little bit better. So that's what made me decide to join Fiverr as a seller. And I've been on there since 2022 as a seller, and 2013 as a buyer. So that's the journey.
That's awesome. And I know that all of us here that are joining around the world, myself included, are so excited to hear about what goes on behind the scenes when you join Fiverr and you're looking through the roster of all of our incredible freelancers and all of the various services that they offer. And, you know, it's a lot. So on the freelancing side, we want to know, what is a client looking for as they source that freelance talent? And before we dive in with you, Paris, I also want to mention to everyone watching that you too can have a chance to ask Paris or myself questions in the second half of this conversation. So to submit a question, please use either the QR code on the screen, or what you can do is write in the comment section of our link of Fiverr's LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook streams. So back to the questions that we originally prepared. Paris, I'll open with this. We love you gave us a quick description of the journey that you've had as a as a business owner so far. But could you share a little bit about the exact freelance talent and the services that you have needed to grow it, and maybe start in the beginning? Like, what were those initial purchases of services that you made, and why did you decide those freelancers were the right ones?
For sure. So just to give you a handful, it was virtual assistant, social media, content management, writers, designers, editors, and project managers, just as myself. And from the business that I was running, which was a basketball training business, I didn't have a lot of capital to start with. It was difficult to find good help, and I knew I wanted to scale fast. I was on the ground. I was actively increasing the business, but I didn't have all the time in the world to feel like I need to train someone. And then not only that, there were some areas within my business that I wasn't an expert in. So I wanted to find that help. I wanted to find that talent, and I wanted to minimize the learning curve, but at the same time, allow my business to grow at a rate that was aligned with my goals. So from a virtual assistant standpoint, yes, I could have found someone that could have done things on the ground or in person, but being able to have a virtual assistant allowed me to expand into other areas of the US as well, and being able to be available when I needed as well, and not so much rely on the time zone that I was in. From the social media and content management at the point, this was, thinking about 2011, 2012, I didn't know too much about social media and how to manage it. And then yet alone, I'm training, I'm in the gym and I'm doing certain things. I needed someone to take that task or those activities on. Writers, there's content that you have to educate basketball athletes on, parents, being able to push educational content out there. So that definitely freed up time. But I think the biggest one that supported and helped me the most were the virtual assistants and the designers, where I needed to put out content such as digital flyers, business cards, web designing. So those were the main ones that I kind of look for Fiverr to.
Got it. I love that you say all of these creative things. This is actually how I was introduced to Fiverr in the beginning. There's so many artists, designers, you name it, on our site. And I think one of the first things people do when they start a business is they're like, what kind of logo do I need? What should my website look like? And design is such an essential component to that. And I'd love to ask you, Paris, about your decision to come to Fiverr versus other platforms. Was there something about Fiverr that you just said, this is the right freelance platform for me?
Yeah, for sure. Think about it. When Fiverr still launched, you can even tell by the name, it was the $5 model, right? So to be able to go get a talent or a resource at an affordable price, that was very intriguing. So that was the go-to. But once I actually got into the platform and opened up a lot of more other things that it allowed me to experience, such as, freeing up my time. I didn't have to go out and find employees. And I had to understand that most of the things that I was doing was project based. It wasn't something that was potentially a process. I handled more of the procedural things, but I needed things to be done in a certain fashion from a start to end. And when you work with freelancers or when you find platforms like Fiverr, that's exactly what you find. Also, you think about if you're a buyer, if you're starting your business, no matter if you're a seller or a buyer, you're in those experimental phases where you're trying to figure things out. And to be able to go to a platform and not pay as much, but then connect and build with certain people to try things out is less of a burden to say, you know what, I have to go hire an employee and pay that person $40,000 a year just to do this task versus I can just go find a freelancer that can do the same job for $20. I can see if it works out or not, and it'll be X amount of time to get that done. So I think cost effective is something that you should keep in mind in experimental stages, which I was in. And then I want to get things done quicker.
Yeah.
Versus to finding someone that I needed to train or doing application after application and bringing people in. I was able to get things done quicker because I was able to find the experts and see that they were experts based on their profile and the things that they provided. So
yeah, on that. That's a
Yeah,
good segue to my next question because, like, I think for so many people that have come here to this webinar and are listening in to try and improve their own profiles, you really hit on something that's important, and that is in your profile describing what exactly you can do, but also how quickly you can get it done. So is that, and obviously price, you mentioned how freelancers, you're not paying that annual salary, that yearly salary, you're paying per service. So are these the three things that you look for most when you're perusing the Fiverr marketplace and trying to pick that freelancer? Is it price? Is it how quickly they can get it done? Like, tell me the order that you care about.
for sure. It was rating, reviews, and price. Don't get me wrong, the turnaround time is great. But those three, the ratings, the reviews, and price were important. One, rating means that you've done a fair amount of work and people have given you stars or given you credit for the work that you have done. And then reviews, you have people that have went out their way to really write something incredible about you. And then from a price standpoint, again, from the earlier stages when I first started, price was a consideration because ROI, return on investment, is very important when you are trying to run a business and to be able to keep everything cost effective. That allows your business to grow so that you can see more profit and put more of that profit back into yourself. So those three, ratings, reviews, and price, was very key.
All right, now let's talk about the actual visual of that gig, of the gig page, or the gig card, as we call it internally here at Fiverr. So when you're deciding between freelancer A and freelancer B, would you rather see a photograph of someone? Would you rather see a more descriptive gig title? What are other components that really help a freelancer stand out?
Yeah, so if you're talking about just the gig, the profile itself, I'll start with a couple of things of not to do and then dive into some things that you should do. But not being too broad, and make sure that you're being specific in what you're offering. That definitely helps because as a buyer, as I'm coming in, there's a lot of options out there, right? So you have to be able to say, this is exactly what I do, and this is exactly what aligns with the buyer is looking for. Also, once you look at the profile, you also have your gigs, right? Your gigs are they all related? Are they unrelated? Does the buyer see a full movie? Meaning that, okay, I can definitely use this and I can probably use this after I'm done with this. And is this something that I can work with this person, not only just now, but in the future? Um, Pictures are definitely great. It's good to see what people look like. It's definitely refreshing to see that it's more of an official, more of a professional look. So that helps. But I think once you go to a profile, it's the colors, it's what grabs from the description, is what makes you stand out that you do differently than others. And that's what I would say is to hone in on that. One other thing I would say is to, when speaking with clients or putting things in there, make sure that you seem available. Some profiles make it seem like some sellers are not available. Ensuring that you get the buyer to make some type of initial communication to ensure that you can get the sale or get the client after is very important.
I think a lot of that comes down to response time as well. I know that when you're on the platform, there's even a green dot by your freelancer profile showing potential buyers that you're there and ready to answer a question immediately. But that's really interesting what you said about making sure it looks like you are available, because yeah, some profiles don't even have their gig cards at the ready. They say, contact me. And maybe that would turn off a buyer like you because you want to see those active gig cards.
Exactly. That's you hit it right on the head. To being able to see someone at that moment when I'm in search mode, I would like for someone to respond ASAP. And then not only that, I'm thinking forward, right? To say if I'm working on this project, if I need to request something or ask you for something, are you responsive? How do you respond? So that starts from the initial look of the profile and how the entry looks.
I always tell new freelancers, download the Fiverr app, because then you can respond to inquiries, like a text, and respond, and then you can get your response rate to an hour or less. And I think that really helps push your profile to the top of the charts. Before I ask you a couple more of my questions, I just wanted to remind everyone that is watching that you can also submit your own questions by using the QR code that you see on the screen, or by writing in the comments section of any of Fiverr's social channels, like our YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. Okay, so Paris, another question for you. We talked about green flags, but what makes a profile stand out. But let's talk about some of those red flags. What are some things that freelancers should avoid putting in their bio or in their profile that makes you stop in your tracks and think like, I'm not going to hire them?
Yes. I would say when the description is too long, do not make the description too lengthy, and make sure that you are including exactly what you are offering within there to make the buyer have somewhat of understanding what they're getting into. When you are creating your gigs, I know that there's some sellers that have multiple gigs, but try not to create too many gigs to where the buyer gets lost. Some buyers are not always in the mindset of knowing what they want. So when you have too many options, they may just completely stop and not look at all. One of the other things I would also raise as a red flag is talking too much about your clients. And this is after you start talking with them through the text, right? Some people say, well, I have a lot of clients. My capacity is X, and I may be able to fit it in, or I may not. I know this is not as related to the profile, but I wanted to highlight that because when you are working with a buyer, you want them to feel that you have time and you are available, and that you'll be able to deliver on that time with the quality that they're expecting.
I just wanted you to clarify that a little more, so you don't want freelancers to talk to you too much. Is this before you make the order, or is this during the order?
Yeah, so always reach out to buyers and get a feel for the availability, send them the requirements. And through the message, sometimes they will say, well, I'm working with this X amount of client, or I only have this amount of availability. And that gives the buyer the sense of you're too busy for them. So even though you have clients, even though you have priorities, I think it's up to the seller, the business owner, to make sure that they handle that and effectively manage that on their end without allowing the buyer to see that. Now, if you're completely booked and you don't have the availability, then you can say that. But if you are moving forward to do this work, it's probably not in the best interest, or best to minimize how much you talk about other clients' priorities.
That's really interesting, because I think putting on like my freelancer hat, writing something like that I'm trying to imply that, hey, I'm in demand and you're getting a lot when you work with me. But from the client side, that's a good point that you made, that no one wants to work with someone that's that busy. They want to feel like your time, the freelancer's time and energy, is dedicated to that specific client.
For sure. Mention it. Definitely. How you just stated it. Definitely. But if it seems in a way where it can negatively impact the quality of work that you're providing the buyer, that's that fine line where it comes into play.
Okay. And then you had one other point. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah, no worries. The language barrier. And it happens, right? Because you may get a freelancer in a different country or in a different place, and sometimes there is a language barrier. So being able to go ahead.
Well, to that, I was going to say Fiverr has some really neat language tools, and we've integrated so much AI to really help people that have English as a second or third language, make sure that their spelling is corrected, and just as an assist in some of the chats.
I love that. I'm glad that Fiverr has implemented that. So that's it. That's all I have.
All right, so the next question, and then we'll get to audience questions. So please keep submitting, because we have our wonderful producer Liz nearby, and she's taking in all of those questions and is going to feed them to me when the time comes. But I would love to know, Paris, your best experience hiring a freelancer on Fiverr, and how did you find this person, this super freelancer, let's call them? Why and how did they impress you? And have you hired them again?
Yeah, I'll go through the quick process of how I found that person because it's how I find anyone now. So go to Fiverr, I type in the right words that I'm looking for. I try to look for the top sellers, top freelancers that have probably about a 4.8, 4.9 or better, and they
Mhm.
have a decent amount of reviews. Then I look at the reviews of that bunch that I pulled and find the top ones with the most quality comments. After I find those, then I at least contact about 3 to 5, depending on the number that I pull, and see who responds the quickest. So at that point, I'm seeing who has a quick response rate. And then as they're replying or in the midst of me reaching out, I'm also now looking at the profiles, looking at all those things that we just talked about and the gigs in between, to see if they have other services that I can leverage in the future. Once I find the one who will negotiate the best price and seems to know about the type of work that I'm looking for, then that's when I'll ask for examples or samples of their work. Some people have it posted on the Fiverr profile, some people do not. A lot of the work that I do, I would require to see it actually physically. So ensure, and then after that, I would ensure that they understand the process. I want to understand what your process looks like, and I want you to understand what my process looks like. And then
Mhm.
I'll have them send an offer, and then most times it's a custom offer because that person is willing to win over my business, and I'm willing to work with them, and it's a price and a custom offer we can agree to, and then I'll just purchase the actual gig and go from there. The person that or the freelancer or seller that I work with as of now that I still use, I found the right person according to the same process I just shared. I hired one person that did one thing really, really well. They did it consistently and they delivered on time within a reasonable price. She did so well, I referred her to my actual networks. Also, later to find out, she was able to support similar and related activities that didn't require me to go and look for other freelancers on the platform. This allowed me to cut costs, time, and it allowed me to consolidate and build a better long term relationship with this actual seller.
Do you want to give her a shout out or?
Vicky, yes, Vicky,
Okay. Is that
yes,
is
sure.
that what's her full username? Do you have it offhand?
Uh, I can send
I,
we can send it.
we can
I
put
can
it
send it
in a caption later. No
for sure.
worries. Sorry to throw you a curveball.
No, no, no worries.
All right. So on the other side of the coin, have you ever canceled an order on Fiverr or worked with someone that you're like, never again, never again?
Good question. Um, so no, I haven't. I'm sorry to say, and the reason why I have not is
Okay,
because
good.
as a project manager and as someone that is dedicated to the work that I do, I always like to see things through, and I take everything as a learning lesson. Even if it was not done right, I've never worked with someone that didn't say that they wouldn't fix it or make an attempt to address whatever it was. It may have took a longer time, but that's okay with me. But we got the job done. And the reason why these situations are minimized is just due to everything that we talked about before, where how I find them from the start to minimize that type of activity. So
Yeah, and I hope everyone listening who, is a freelancer, but also the buyers that are listening, do that due diligence that Paris described, and then you will, it sounds like, always be a happy customer because you'll have vetted that freelancer accordingly. Let's move to AI because everyone loves talking about AI these days.
oh,
With the introduction of AI, Paris, many freelancers have seen an impact on their business, many of them positively. They're able to brainstorm ideas quicker or perhaps write a little faster or put designs together through AI assistance. Have you used Fiverr to hire freelancers to do AI work for you?
recently I just tried it out, and as we talked about before, when you're in the experimental phase, I always like to try things out to see if it works. And one of the things that I tried it out on was more of like online education, like an educational course. So I did start that. I initiated that from an experience of how it went. It went well. Still evaluating it as well as the AI. I know it's useful, and I know it's something that's new. But yes, I've tried that out.
I think planet Earth is evaluating AI right now. We're all in the same camp.
Yes.
And then are there any tasks that let me look at this question again. Are there any tasks that you use to assign to freelancers that you now use AI to complete? And if so, what have the results been like?
Yeah. So I've been sitting down looking at everything that I do purchase on Fiverr and say, what can I use AI for instead of utilizing the talent? And at the end of the day, I keep coming back to my same answer where I still rely on humans as of now. But I do use a mix of AI and freelancers to enhance my authenticity, meaning that
Mhm.
even though that you can use AI, I still need someone to leverage their brain, their thoughts, their creative juices. And then you may just add a little bit of AI twist to it where you just needed to format something. You just needed to draw out the shell of something. But at the end of the day, the end of the pieces or the lower level activities, I'm still looking for someone to support with that. Not saying that you can't use AI and get away with it and not use a seller, but I'm at a point where I like to leverage a little bit of both to make sure I still have that creativity and authenticity.
Yeah, on that point, as a content writer on Fiverr, I do use AI. I use ChatGPT to jumpstart ideas and to get the framework for whatever piece I'm writing. Of course, it's been in the news, and we all know that ChatGPT doesn't always give out factually correct information. So I'm so careful to always fact check and make sure that there is no form of that content anywhere else on the internet. And thankfully, with the advent of AI and ChatGPT, there's been all of these new websites that have come out that allow you to copy paste content to see where it's coming from or if there is any plagiarism. So it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you're jumpstarting ideas and you're no longer dealing with a blank page. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, there's a lot of times where you should not be relying on ChatGPT or AI to complete your work, and you should really be triple and quadruple checking, making sure the facts are right.
Yep, that makes sense. I agree.
All right, my last question for you, and then we'll move on to audience questions. Paris, you are a community leader for Fiverr, which we're so thankful to you for. And you connect many freelancers in the Chicago area where you're based, and you connect them, not only within that area, but around the country. You spend a great deal of time mentoring freelancers and sharing your perspective as a buyer. So with that in mind, what are freelancers that you've spoken to most concerned about when it comes to buyer relations?
Awesome. They're gonna love me for this one. So, long-term relationships for reoccurring revenue. They're looking to find ways to build more of a long-term relationship so that they can have that reoccurring revenue. So they just don't rely on a project base where I get paid here and then there's a gap and then I get paid there and it's kind of like sporadic out or spaced out. They also want the ability to collaborate with other freelancers on projects to accommodate requests that they may not be able to provide. So they may be working with a customer or a buyer, and they're providing that one set thing. But the buyer may also say, well, I need this and I need that, right? So then now they're able to collaborate with someone to refer it or dish it out, and they can share that work or ensure that their customer, the buyer, is still seeing their goals or realizing their growth because they've referred from a source. And then the last thing is just getting more leads and buyers from the platform. You always hear this: is there an algorithm, or how can I get more? And they're always curious about how can they get more their way. And one of the things I always say is make sure that you go through and looking at your profile, your gigs, your description, ensuring that you're getting your reviews, you're doing quality work, you have your examples, and there's so much more just outside of Fiverr. I know most sellers focus on Fiverr, but there's other avenues outside that you can work with close family and friends. You can go out and promote at different events, but still leveraging the Fiverr platform and your links to bring traffic in. So those are the three things.
That's great advice. So glad you're a community member again. Thanks for doing that
No worries.
and connecting freelancers around the US. We are now going to move into our audience questions. As a reminder, you can still submit questions at this time by scanning the QR code on the screen or by leaving a comment on our LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook streams. The first question that we have is from Muhammad K from YouTube. He asks you, Paris, are buyers comfortable working with new sellers? So I'm assuming this means someone without a review, someone who's brand new to the platform. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, so I would say it's based on the buyer's experience and the buyer's budget. For someone like me, I may not look at a new buyer, but I'm open to working with a buyer based on the information and how your profile and your gigs are structured. If I know that the project is more complex, right, and I need someone that's an expert, then most likely I'm going to go look for an experienced seller. But if it's something that's new and I'm searching around and I don't see a lot of other people that are in that realm or in that niche, and you may be one of the new sellers, then I may go with you, especially if you have your profile and your gigs and your description put together well.
Okay. Another question from another Muhammad K from YouTube. Do you rely on the description of gigs or reviews/price more? And how important is the gig image? Which you did answer before, but if you want to re-up that answer.
Yeah, I still rely on that. We talked about the ratings, the price, and the reviews. So those are my top three. The description is very important, but again, sometimes I'm working on my phone, right? So when I see my phone, you just see the actual profile. I see the photo, I see the ratings, and I see the reviews, and I see the short description. And I guess that has to be well defined too. So there's a short description, and then there's a longer description if you open up the actual profile. That short description has to be sweet, has the keywords, and have an impact on what I'm looking for. And then I'm just looking at that. Now, after I find those handpicked that I just talked about, those 3 or 5, then I may go deeper into their description to see what they actually offer. But you have to catch my eye right up front.
Okay. And speaking of catching your eye, Francesco is asking, any tips for the thumbnail of the gig? So this is not the profile picture, it's the gig image itself. And how do you go about the fact that presentation videos don't have thumbnail like YouTube's, for example?
Yeah. Well, one, the thumbnail is very important. When you are saving images and videos in Fiverr, as some of you know, the SEO, search engine optimization, make sure you are saving your files with certain names under your images as well, because that has an opportunity to be picked up as well. As far as the videos, you can use editing tools outside of Fiverr to make sure that your thumbnail is at the forefront. And that you can use, CapCut and everything else to make sure that is well put together. I don't know if that answered the question, but thumbnails are definitely key to having out there because that plays a part from the initial site from a buyer.
One of the thumbnails that I use for my mini documentary writing comes from it's a still from the mini documentary that I wrote, but it's really because it was such a big file initially, and Fiverr doesn't host massive files when it comes to the gig image. It's a little pixelated. I haven't had any issues with any buyer saying, why is that not top-notch quality? But what do you think about that? Just for my own question.
Yeah, the quality of it. Are we talking about just the color, the clarity, right? Because you got color, you got the clarity.
It's clarity, I would say, because it's a little pixelated.
Got it. Yeah, so I would definitely pay attention to the pixelated, but I have seen some where it's a little fuzzy and then some that are a little clear. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I definitely would say make sure that you have the pixels and everything right. And I believe when you're uploading everything, Fiverr tells you what the parameters are for uploading certain photos. So I would say yes. Make sure that it's clear, it has clarity, and it has good content. 3C.
Okay. Next question, Andy M from YouTube. How can I wow my clients before, during, and after the order? Would a freebie be helpful?
For sure. So before, one of the things that you can do is start to work on it somewhat before they even purchase. So I've had people say, "Hey, send me everything over. Let me see if I can. Let's see how it goes. Let me see if I can start working on it." And I've had people actually start working on it before I even purchase. Now, you have to be mindful of that. But that's winning me over, saying that they're eager to work. They can show me some type of sample or just 20% of the work, so I can say, okay, they've moved on it. They can do exactly what I'm looking for. And then once you provide the gig or provide the actual custom offer, you can provide a discount, right? You can provide a coupon. You can do bulk purchase, which I like, because if I know that a client or a buyer is going to purchase multiple, you can say, hey, do you plan on purchasing 3 or 5 of these in the future? Well, I'll give you 1 for free if you buy 3 at a time. And then after, let's go back to the during. During, make sure that you're also checking in with the progress of the project and giving them samples along the way. So like at 25%, you'll show them what it looks like, at 50% and at 75%, because then you'll be able to check in and minimize any issues or anything that you may not have caught after you've submitted it. Now, don't get me wrong, your gig may say, one revision, 2 revision, 3 revision, but it minimizes how many revisions you go through if you do those checkpoints within your first revision. And then after, making sure that you get those reviews, right? Because if you've done the upfront work, you provided value, overly provided value, and then you've checked in and you've delivered exactly what they wanted, they will give a review, right? And then they potentially will even give a tip. So that's my advice.
That's such great advice. And I don't do that. I normally just wait until it's done and then I submit, and then they go through the revision process. But then you're right, you lose them sometimes in terms of the review, because then time runs out, the Fiverr clock that we all know about. And all of a sudden it's like they've accepted it on their side, but they don't leave the review. But if I'd gone through so I'm assuming you're going through the chat with these freelancers and they're giving you the 25% done and they submit it via the order chat.
Yeah, I have different things. So I've had people where, they'll start working on it, especially after I've built a relationship with them. After the first one, they'll start working on it. And once they've got it to a point where it's, somewhat acceptable, they'll send the actual, the actual gig or send the purchase. And then the remaining work is just finalizing everything. And then it goes to a close. And I've had situations where they'll start on 10%, they'll send me the gig, and then just throughout the duration of the gig, because they know how long it's going to take for them, they've done a good job at being a project manager, and they've done good check-ins within that 5-day duration to ensure that it's on time with the buyer to close it out. And then they will have less revisions after that.
Yeah. No, that's like really fascinating to me as a freelancer on Fiverr, and something that I'm definitely going to change in my workflow. But you mentioned time management, and I usually get questions like, how do you do your work on top of your work? And I'm like, the skill they don't normally talk about is time management. Like as long as you can break down whatever project you're doing into 10-minute, 15-minute increments, or you can block off that 1 hour to do some really deep work. It's like you can definitely fit in some freelancing on the side. All right, next question. Do you see, and we talked a little bit about, but let's go a little bit deeper into this question. Do you see too many gigs on a profile or too few gigs as a red flag? And what would you say is the optimal number, Paris?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's too few, but it can impact your business if you're trying to grow. And I wouldn't say it's too many, but it can impact your business if you're not concentrated and focused. So if you're just starting out, obviously you may only have 1 gig, But as you start growing, you should start looking at your data or your performance of your buyers and start stratifying and say, well, I'm a content writer. I write blogs, and I had 2 clients that write for sports. I had 5 that writes for cooking or whatever it is. Now you can start being more specific and saying, hey, I will write your blog focused on sports. You can create another gig for that's not as generalized, and then you can make one for cooking. So now you'll draw in additional audiences because your description and everything is more specific. And then now when you have buyers come to your profile, they know exactly which one to buy, and you know exactly what you are getting into when they purchase it. So I would keep that in mind.
Also on that point, I think that's specificity is it's just so important when you're getting on Fiverr, because the competition is fierce. You have freelancers all over the world who are offering various services. If you can be so specific with the gig that you're offering, like I will write cooking blogs, as you just mentioned, that word cooking, and just having that that category, your own. Now you're going from, I'm competing against 100 or 200 top rated blog writers to maybe 10 who write cooking blogs. So just something for everyone watching to keep in mind. I found that when I started as a voiceover artist on Fiverr, there were so many voiceover gigs. I was like, I will never get an order. This is crazy. But as soon as I added anchor voiceover and breaking news voiceover, because of my past experience working in the news, I did get orders. And that's how I was able to grow and get reviews and then grow to become a Fiverr Pro seller that I am now. Okay, next question. How do you approach using multiple freelancers for the same project? Do you put them in communication with each other? Great question.
That's a very great question. Initially, no. I love having multiple freelancers that do the same thing. One, just due to availability. 2, one may be unavailable when I need them. And 3, I may need to see different versions of something and then choose from that. So that gives me variety to pick the type of quality that I need. It also allows me to keep my projects going if someone is out. So hopefully that answered the question. Was there a part 2 to that?
No, do you put them in communication with each other?
Yeah. So now that more of the community, the Fiverr leadership activities, I'm working on putting some of the freelancers in communication with each other so that they can understand what's going on and learn from each other from a community standpoint, right? Because you may have a freelancer that does social media management and another, and they may be suffering from some issues with their business, but other one may be thriving. So being able to leverage that connection, it helps each other grow, not only on their profile, but personally in their business as well.
Okay. And we have one more question, Paris, before we'll wrap things up. Okay. What is a sign in a profile that you would trust working with a freelancer? I don't know if I phrased that correctly or if that's what they meant, but is there a sign in a profile that would allow you to really trust a freelancer? I think that's what they're trying to say.
Most times when I get that light bulb is whenever someone does something professionally. To your point, Laura, you worked at the news channel. I would say, oh, she knows exactly what she's doing, right? Or if someone has done something outside of Fiverr for X amount of years, they were a former teacher who used to grade essays, right? Or someone that has done it in their past life or continuously doing it, and they're just adding this to Fiverr to complement what they're doing. To be able to see that gives me a little bit of confidence that they're a professional, and I'll have less time or less startup time with them.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, everyone, we are at the end of our conversation with Paris. But Paris, it was amazing getting a look behind the scenes and how to relate and work with Fiverr freelancers. So we're so grateful for you for joining us. And we're so grateful for everyone watching. Thank you for coming out here and asking the thoughtful questions that you did today. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, where you are welcome to continue the conversation in the chat. And we are going to be back in April with our second session of What Clients Want with another guest speaker. So please look out for your invite. Thanks.
Excellent. And then just make sure that you guys visit parisdavis.com. You can download my free to-do list for buyers and sellers. parisdavis.com. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Paris.